Welcome to the Author's Attic, a production brought to you by Social Problems, the official journal of SSSP, the Society for the Study of Social Problems. I'm Lydia Howe, and today I will be joined by David Kirk of Nuffield College at the University of Oxford to discuss his article entitled Prisoner Reentry and the Reproduction of Legal Cynicism. Without further delay, I am happy to welcome Professor Kirk.
So my motivation for this study was really to explore the consequences of mass incarceration for the culture of neighborhoods. So there's like 7 million individuals under some form of correctional supervision at this very 5 million in under parole or probation supervision, another 1.6 million in state or federal prison, and the rest in local jails. You know, and so each year there's about 600, actually more than 600,000 individuals coming out of U.S. prisons each year, going back to neighborhoods. You know, which is a massive increase since the 1970s. You know, and really, despite the magnitude of the number of people coming out of prison each year, you know, it's certainly not the case that they're evenly distributed across neighborhoods. Rather, they're really quite concentrated into a select few neighborhoods, typically in metropolitan areas. So figure 4 of the paper shows the spatial clustering of ex-prisoners in Chicago over the past couple of decades. You know, and while the clustering has shifted a little bit over time, it is certainly true that the most neighborhoods are, you know, really have very few former prisoners, and there's a select few neighborhoods that have an enormous number. So to the extent that convicted criminals have had some pretty negative experiences with the law and are distrustful of the criminal justice system, the funneling of massive numbers of individuals back into those select few neighborhoods really may have a devastating effect on the perceptions of law and authority figures among residents in the neighborhoods. You know, so what I do in this paper is I ask, you know, what are the effects of prisoner reentry on the culture of neighborhoods, particularly with respect to cynicism of the law and the police. You know, and really at its core, the argument is about the cultural transmission of negative views of the law through neighborhood social networks. You know, so where does this study fit in the wider literature? Well, prior research reveals that the rate of prisoner reentry in a neighborhood is positively associated with subsequent crime rates and recidivism rates, but the research literature is you know, there's not much out there identifying the intervening mechanisms which explains why the concentration of returning prisoners in geographic space is so consequential. In terms of my own agenda, this study pulls together two of the key components of my agenda. The first being a focus on neighborhood culture and legal cynicism, and the second is the focus on prisoner reentry. Figure 5 of this study presents the conceptual model of the cross-lagged path analysis that I estimate to examine the relationship between concentrated prisoner reentry and legal cynicism. And in this model, I control for a variety of exogenous characteristics of neighborhoods. And really the paths E and F in that figure are the primary interest of the study, and they're used to determine if there's a significant association between concentrated prisoner reentry and subsequent legal cynicism, as well as the reciprocal relationship. I use a variety of data sources in the study, including 2 waves of data on the volume of returning prisoners to zip codes throughout Illinois, and that's data from the Illinois Department of Corrections. I also have 2 waves of data from the U.S. Census, as well as data on neighborhood social processes from the Project on Human Development in Chicago Neighborhoods and the Chicago Community Adult Health Study. Moving into results, focusing on the diagonals in figure 6 of the paper, I do find a significant positive association between concentrated prisoner reentry at time 1 and legal cynicism at time point 2. You know, so in support of my main hypothesis, a dense concentration of returning prisoners in a neighborhood really facilitates the production of cynical views of the law among neighborhood residents. I do not, however, find evidence of the reciprocal relationship. Briefly on some of the implications of these findings, you know, the reasons why ex-prisoners tend to concentrate in geographic space, include personal factors such as ties to the neighborhood, but it's also related to a lack of housing options. And the lack of housing options for ex-offenders is a product of a lack of income and wealth and job prospects of the typical offender, but it's also the product of the unwillingness of landlords and owners in the private housing market to rent to felons, and the combination of long waiting lists and the unwillingness of public housing authorities to provide vouchers or public housing units to formerly incarcerated individuals. For all these reasons, individuals coming out of prison, they tend to cluster in a select few neighborhoods, and the results of my research suggest that this clustering really facilitates the contagious spread of cynical views of the law among residents in a neighborhood. And because prior research, including some of my own research, has shown that legal cynicism is positively predictive of crime and neighborhood violence, really this geographic clustering of prisoner reentry undermines public safety. So one solution to kind of lessen and reduce the level of legal cynicism in neighborhoods is to disperse the formerly incarcerated individuals across a wider number of neighborhoods instead of the current pattern, which is really a dense concentration of them in a select few neighborhoods.
You've been watching The Author's Attic. Thank you to our featured guest, David Kirk. Please stay tuned for future installments. We'll see you then.